So this is a video on a issue I just ran into. So I run a product called Pre-Product. It's pre-orders for e-commerce stores, Shopify, ecommerce, that kind of thing. But the scenario we've kind of found ourselves in is Shopify recently launched an update. Well, they haven't launched it yet publicly, but they're going to support 2048 variants as opposed to their current max, which is 100 variants, which is great. Everyone wants it, but it does show some kind of unique issues which we're running into in the app. So I'll just quickly show you what a product variant is. So product has lots of SKUs, and each SKU is a variant. Each variant is made up of a product option. So you can see here there's color, size, length. So you could have a one variant, which would be white, extra small, long, but all of these multiply together to create all of your variants. So if we go back here, I think these have got 288. So I'll show you what this screen in the app looks like normally. So this is a similar product, but we've only got like 12 variants. And here we've got a little search bar. That all works very nice, it's very quick. We click pre-order limits. We can kind of flick between these and set maximum limits. Now, let me show you what happens when we look at this with our product loaded up with all these 288 variants. So still nowhere near the 2048 variants. So I clicked that about a second before it actually accepted the cursor. And then if I do this, okay, so the search is quite fast, but let me show you what happens when I launch this modal. And so I'm going to click. It's about a second delay. And I typed maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just huge delays. And then you can navigate through the screen with arrow keys. So if I click arrow down, it's just nuts. It adds so much delay. And what's interesting is this modal's really nicely optimized. It's all server rendered. You can click between these, and that would be really quick normally. And to make my point, let's delete this from the DOM. And you'll see that something I should mention, we don't use heavy front-end libraries, we don't use React, nothing like that. We just use Hotwire, so Stimulus.js is the only thing we really use in the front end, and Turbo, and then everything else is vanilla JavaScript or classes of Stimulus. So if I delete these, and then we go back to set pre-order limits, then you can click long, arrow down, go back again. It's all back to as fast as it should be. So the thing that we worked out, which is slowing it down, is just all of these, the natural browser behavior of all of these items down here. So event listeners, everything like that. So how are we going to solve that? Well, the way Shopify solves it, and the way that I've been trying to solve it, is using a technique called virtual scrolling. And let me show you what that looks like. The concept is you have you have items in the DOM, but then when you scroll down, items are taken out of the actual DOM, so the actual browser document, and they're stored in like local storage, session storage, something like that. And I'm not sure if you can see this, but I've got my browser tools open, and as I scroll down, you'll see all these items getting removed and added back in. And that's actually what I've tried to do on this screen, in this area, and it worked okay, but it a bit tricky to understand, and it was introducing a lot of complexity. And you can see we've got this filtering option here, and that didn't play well with virtual scrolling. So if we only had like the first 10 variants on the page in the DOM, and then we searched for like red long, we'd have to pluck those out of the virtual DOM and mix them with the ones in the DOM. And then if there was an overflow of, say, if it was 100 results, we'd only want to show the first like 20 in the actual DOM. So it just got complicated really quickly. I've got an idea actually how to completely solve this quite simply using Hotwire, so using turbo frames in a slightly different way to normal, relying on their lazy loading. So that's what we're going to have a look at today. Right, let's jump into the code editor. So here is here's the view of that variant section I was showing before. And you can see we've got some stimulus here. So we've got a variant search, and down here we've got a component which works with that. So a view component. And what we can do is we declare this, and then we've got a search block, and a search with items, I should say, and that's where we can kind of put our, we can loop through our variants, and when we can render one item for each of our variants. So I'll show you that quickly. Yep, so the items just go in here, and then they load out here, and that all works. And I think there's some buttons and links. That's how that all works. What I actually want to do is, currently we have this variants controller, and a create action is when you put a variant on pre-order, and destroy is when you put a variant off pre-order. What I want to do is add a show action here, and then just jump to a view. So actually we might be doing all this in streams. Yep. So after that each screen we've run this, and we update the dashboard. We've got it broken out into a couple of different areas. So like this area, header, stats there, key information down here, and then pre-order results on the right. What I actually want to do is create a view, a show view for this controller. So let's do that. Yeah, so pre-products, we've already got variants. No, not explicitly. So variants, new file, show html.erb. Might end up being a turbo stream, but we'll worry about that later. And then my idea is, so if we strip these variants into batches of say 10. So let me do that. So 5 times variants, and we load them all like this. What I want to do is add some checkpoints in. So between each batch, I want to put in turbo frame, and then have a what was it? Loading lazy. So this will mean that this frame only gets looked at by Turbo on the front end once it comes into the view, I think using section observers. And then we'll have a URL of, what is it, like pre-products variant path. That's SRC, isn't it? Yeah, source, and then I want to have the way these would there is I want to have some params. So this will be a get request to that show action, and it'll have what was I thinking? Yeah, just some really simple language. So maybe gets, and like, let's say 1 to 5, and then removes, let's say yeah. I'm not sure. I'm going to do one further down here. So what we want to do is, like, say this is whatever it is, like 25, and then I want to remove like 2 checkpoints before it. So we'd want so it's like 15 to 25. Yeah, like that. So my idea is that we have one of these between each of these batches of variants, and as the user scrolls down and these come into view, Turbo will fire the get request for us, and then instead of just updating this Turbo frame like it would normally do, so just within this HTML there, what we'll actually do is we'll return Turbo streams. We'll return one Turbo stream to get variants 25 to 30, and we'll return one Turbo stream to remove 15 to 25. And my plan is all of these will be different, and they'll just all increment up as you'd expect, and that way we'll get that nice scrolling down here, having variants get removed up there from a DOM, and then new variants added in. Now, the trick is, I think we'll have to get the numbers right, so it's not noticeable by the user. But I think that should be a lot more elegant than trying to do it on the front end with JavaScript. And it also means that when we do add in the search functionality, we'll be able to do that all from the controller, and we'll just search for it, and then we'll still be able to paginate properly and just return the results that we need. So that's my plan. I'm going to go away and see if I can implement this now, and I'll record on how that goes. Cheers. Okay, cool. So it's a couple of days later. I filmed the first bit of this video on a Saturday, and now it's a Monday, so I'm actually some hours in yesterday and then a bit today as well. Good news is I've got a working solution. Bad news is I had to use more JavaScript than I thought, but I'm going to show you my first attempt with the turbo frames, and then I'll show you the actual solution I went with. But first, let's see this in actually working. So this is the variant section, and so I'll show you just scrolling first, and let's have a look. So for example, we've got these sections. You can see each one of these sections has 10 items, and we keep 3 sections with items in, and then the others we clear their items. So only a maximum of 3 sections will ever have individual variants in. And I'll show you if you just keep your eye on that spec, you see these get added in, and then when you go up, they get taken away. And it should be a reasonably smooth kind of experience like that. And then our search works as well, so we can do green like that, and you'll see we can keep on scrolling, and that all works. And then we've got no results found. And then another scenario which was a bit tricky was something where there was only, like, say 1.5 sections worth, but that all is working now as well. And let me just also prove that it's fixed our latency issue. So if I click in straight away, I can go here and start interacting with it. And then if I click set pre-order limits, this straight away I can kind of interact with, and it all works kind of fine. So just how I wanted it to work. So let's have a little look at the code, and I'm just going to hop over to this version of the app, which is an iframe, so I can hot reload. So let's get up the version I did have. Is this right? Yeah. Okay, so what I did try to do before was have these different turbo frames which would load in, they'd lazy load in, and my thinking was as soon as the turbo frame became visible, we would hit the server, and instead of just updating that frame's content, we'd come back with re-rendering this file, and that meant we'd be able to kind of remove some turbo frames from a DOM, like other ones, not just the one which triggered it, and do it that way, and kind of just rely on the lazy loading of turbo. That didn't work because the intersection observer wasn't, if we look here, it wasn't just treating this area as the kind of viewport, it was actually looking at the whole pane. So it would just fire all the turbo frames straight away as soon as I got down here. And then also having like 4, 5, however many frames were needed, started to make search not really work, and it was becoming a bit confusing. So I ended up scrapping that view, and what I've come with is, well, I'll show you the layers going down. So this pane of a dashboard, that's this. We've got a pre-order limits link down here, and then up here is my view component. So we pass in the variance controller index path with batch number, so just 0, because this is only render on first load. And then we explicitly pass into the item slot these variants, again, request batch 0. Cool. Now let's look at that component. So I had this before, this component's variant search, and that's what powers not only being able to search like that, but also being able to navigate up and down and hit enter to click the link. So we had that already, and that's fine. What I've added in is this virtual scroll, and this feature is mainly powered by this virtual scroll stimulus controller and the response that we get from the server. So let's have a look at maybe let's have a look at the stimulus controller first. So the way this works is it connects, it has item targets, item section targets, a container, and then the search input for the search bar. Items are what they sound like, individual variants. Item section, that is how we've split up all the different variants. So we're doing batches of 10 in this example. And then container, that's just the overall container, and that's what this kind of rectangle, and that's what we use with our intersection observer. So any more of this interesting? Yes, it is actually. Cool. So what happens is we observe the item section, so this rectangle down here. As soon as there's a new visible section, we request from the URL, which was fed in back here, if you remember. And if there is a good response from that, then we actually use idiomorph. So you might be aware that's the library which Turbo uses to morph HTML elements when it's in morph mode. It seems to me that you can't actually use morphing for a lot of Turbo actions. It's mainly for refresh. So I decided to just use that directly here, and you can see there, idiomorph. And it's very clean API. You just kind of just pass in the element you want to morph, and then the kind of new HTML. You can do inner or outer. We're doing inner. And the nice thing about that is I can keep the scroll position. So another issue with the Turbo frame approach was it wasn't keeping scroll, whereas this, we can kind of scroll down and it doesn't jiggle around. You kind of mostly can't tell that it's doing anything above and below the fold. So idiomorph was really good like that. So to summarize, we watch the area where the variants are visible. As soon as the next section appears, we'll request, and then we'll morph in new HTML. And as I'll get to in a second, because we're only returning 3 sections with variants in, the others just have empty strings, and they'll just get kind of cleared in the DOM. And that's how that works. I think it will make a bit more sense once we look at this though. So this is the variance controller, and this is the URL which has been hit, and you can see it's quite simple. We've just got a requested batch, and we have our variant instant variable, and it also quickly checks in case there's a query param for search past. Cool. So let's look at the view. I'm going to try not to rush through this, but also hopefully this isn't too boring. But basically, let's look at some of the variable names, and I'll just quickly talk through them. So batch size, we're limiting it to 10 items per section, and buffer, that's how many sections above and below the actively viewed section should be visible in the DOM. So in our example here, we have one section which you can see, so say 10 variants here, and then above this, below this and above this, there'll be another section either side which also has 10 variants in. So we've got 30 variants in the DOM at any given point. The sections above and below those, they've got nothing in, they're just empty. They just maintain their their ID, so we can kind of grab them, as well as their stimulus data attributes. So that's what those two do. Renderable sections, I just explained that. Max number of visible sections. Again, it's to do with concepts I just talked about. Max number of visible variants. So that's our batch size times total amount of visible sections, so 3 times 10. Specified variants, so this is how we handle having search with for virtual scroll, because that is a bit tricky, because if we do say green, we might have 100, 1,000 different green variants, so we've still got a virtual scroll. We can't just load them all at once and have them all in the DOM. That slows down again. Next, no eligible variants. That's a particular scenario where we specify variants when we pass that into this partial. So it takes a model, variants, and requested batch. If variants is specified but it's an empty array, then we have to do something specific. And then so looking at the actual HTML, we've got some loops and stuff here, but the thing to bear in mind is we're always just going to be rendering a list of sections. Now the question is, are we going to render variants, or are we going to render a loading state, so variant skeleton, or is it a search and there's no results been found? So if you look here, we use this each slice Ruby method, which is great. So it's we're iterating over the variant data, but we're just plucking a batch size, so 10 at a time, and then we'll iterate over that batch, and that's our nice way to create these kind of sections. We've got to make sure we always return the total number of possible sections for all the variants, because remember, we declare them at the beginning in the DOM, so we've got to, if there is no variants eligible for, say, section number 10, we've still got to return section number 10 in the HTML, but it just needs to be empty, or possibly with a loading state. I think I've set it up so you don't really ever see the loading state, but let me show you. Yeah, so if you do scroll really fast and you get to the kind of next section before it's been loaded in, you'll just get this, and keeps all this kind of height the same, and we don't get the kind of layout shift. So that, and then I guess the last thing is just to look at how the search controller uses the virtual scroll controller. So we're actually using stimulus outlets here, which I've always been a little bit nervous about, because it just seems, actually I'll explain what it is quickly. So it's where you can use one stimulus controller from another. You can use its instance, and what you do is you set a DOM selector, so an ID in this case, and we just keep it in the same file so it's easy to keep track of, and you can actually call functions from another controller. I was a little bit worried about using this ever, because it just sounds complicated and tricky to get your head around, but the way I've kind of justified it to myself is this variant search controller is going to be super tightly coupled to this area of the app. We're not going to try and reuse it anywhere else. The virtual scroll controller we probably will use somewhere else, but that's not really coupled in the same way as this is. So we've got this outlet here, and then so when we're filtering items, if we've passed in a URL to the stimulus controller, we can actually make our response to the same URL as our virtual scroll does, and then if the response is okay, we'll actually call on the virtual scroll controller to morph this in, because it understands it understands the sections and things like that. The variant search controller doesn't really need to. They both use the same URL, so it's kind of all set out at the beginning here. So that's the way I'm thinking about it. I think it probably is more complicated than I'd like, but it seems to work okay, and seems to be handling the kind of weird edge cases. Maybe one last thing just to mention, because this was kind of interesting, because we've got two stimulus controllers looking at this. Well, not so much looking, but we've got one that's our intersection observer, the virtual scroll, and then we've got this search bar one. There were some strange timing issues we ran into when you were searching, because obviously if you do like that, our sections are getting all coming to the viewport, or some are, some aren't. So we actually where is it? Yeah, we use our outlet API again to unobserve, then we do our requesting, we do our morphing if needed, and then we reobserve again. So the outlets API, I think, probably was the right tool for the job on this, because there's those two use cases, and that kind of worked as well. But I'd be interested to hear if there's a more elegant approach to handling virtual scrolling in Rails. But I had a Google online and I can see any off-the-shelf Turbo or Stimulus virtual scroll libraries, but maybe the solution does exist, or maybe there's something really simple and elegant you can do just with Turbo. Would love to know if that is a possibility. Hope this was interesting. Cheers.